So I'm starting out with 3 pieces. This is square tubing. I think it's 1/8" wall, 2 by 2. And the stock length for tubing and pipe, I think, is 24 feet. For flats, angle irons, and other structural members, I think is 20 feet is the standard length. Anyhow, so it worked out well. Echoey in here. No vehicles in here now. My wife's got her wreath and centerpiece thing set up. I'm cleaning up my Thanksgiving deep fryer. Snow blowed some snow. And now I'm going to cut some steel. So this is a steel rack, and this is basically the design. I know I've seen a tree style where it's sort of a T, and then you just have, racks on each side of it. I'm looking for stability. I don't want to have to reinforce corners too much. So to me, an A-frame is sort of the most straightforward way to do it. A lot of these details I'll either change or figure out once I get there. But I'm thinking for the very top, I'll probably have something like this. What I'm looking for is 8 feet in length. I'll have a centerpiece. I'm thinking anything less than 4 feet long, I sort of keep in the corner of my short scraps way there, the plywood, the OSB rack there in the corner. And much beyond, say, 10 or 12 feet, I shouldn't have. This is an exception. I bought these specifically for this project. But as far as storing scrap pieces of metal and pipe, I shouldn't really have anything longer than, say, 8 or 12 feet. So the first thing is to cut these. I need 4 of these that are about 48 inches long. I have my cutoff saw set at a 20-degree angle. That is basically this angle here, which I think I calculated at 70 degrees. I have another 2 pieces here in the center, which will not be feet all the way to the bottom. They'll just be, just go down to this cross piece here. So the 4 legs are cut, and this is one of those sort of do it as we go type things, which is the next one I want to cut is this cross piece. So rather than try to figure that out, I think it's just easier to measure it. Because I don't really care how far up it goes. I want room underneath here, for tractor forks to get under here easily to move this around. And I'll go in here, so it'd be 28 inches. So you can see my attempt at trying to capture the metal pieces, bits, shavings, whatever you want to call it. I guess it would be sort of sawdust, except it's not wood. So this is basically what it looks like. Looks like a big A. So I used 1 piece of 3 8-foot pieces. Basically took up an entire 24-foot length. You can see the small piece over there. I did account for the 2-inch frame in the end to make it 8 feet outside to outside, or outside dimensions. 96 minus 4 inches, so those are 92 inches. Gave me a little bit extra from that 24-foot piece. Worked out fairly well too for those. The 4 legs plus the 2 cross pieces used up the other 24-foot piece with right there's extra, so a little bit extra there. Okay, well I have enough now to start putting stuff together and then figure out what other pieces I need to cut. So this is what the frame will look like. For this top piece, I just arbitrarily chose half the base width. So the base width is just over 3 feet, so I cut that at 18 inches. So here I'm just going to tack it together, flip it over, tack the other side, set it aside, and then make sure everything looks right before I weld it home. And I'll probably, because we have a little bit of surface rust, I don't think MIG does the best with surface rust. So after I tack it together, I'll take a wire brush and clean the edges where I'm going to weld. Well, it's sort of what I was envisioning. So the next major step is going to be to put the cross pieces in. Then I have a center one that I think I want to do. Again, we'll sort of play it by ear. But before I put the 8-foot pieces to spread between the end frames, it'll be easier to weld it up. I actually adjusted my helmet a little bit because it was so dark. Sometimes I veered off the joint. So what's nice about these electronic helmets is you can adjust the darkness. So this one is done. I'll do the same to the other one, and then we'll put it together. So this is the setup I'm going to use to attach the first piece, and it'll be end up being the top connecting piece, and I'm going to weld it here so that I may have at least one, maybe two more of these pieces here, so I can stack, lighter weight materials on top. So I just thought it'd be easier to space this down, so I can put the 2x2, in the center here with a single piece. If I put this flush to the top or flush with the floor, then I'd have to, weld on each side, sort of ears. So where this is going to butt up here, so I have a sort of a flat surface, I just ground down the welds so that they are basically flush with the surface of this. And now the next trick is to try to weld this together and keep it square with everything. I do have these wooden blocks to just sort of help with stability a little bit. There's no easy way to check this, really. I mean, this is going to be outside, so it's never going to be set on level ground, so this isn't critical. But I do want to get it as square as I can. I think what I'm going to have to do is just weld a tack, and then if I need to move it to square it up, just sort of bend it. The other thing I'm dealing with, I can't even guarantee that this floor is flat because it all pitches towards the center drain. As you can see here, the snow melting off the car. So probably the further I get into that corner, maybe the flatter it is, but there is a little bit of a taper on sort of all two directions of the floor. So what I think I'll end up doing is tacking this in place enough so I can flip it upside down where the feet are on the floor, which is what matters the most, and then sort of square it up from there. if this will help any or not. All I can sort of do is sort of eyeball it, try to keep a consistent gap, because I can't get tight up here because of the weld. This doesn't seem to be too bad. This one is more straightforward. That's good. The other side needs a little help with this way, so we'll deal with that after I get this one as best I can. I think I gotta come this way just a bit. So I think what I'll do is just push it this way with a firm force and weld it and hope it's good. Well, that's welded good. I guess there's really nothing else I can weld underneath there. So this one will be a little bit of a challenge because I know it's cocked a little bit one way. That straightened it up nicely, and as far as I can tell, from this edge to the vertical is also square. So I'm still relatively a novice at MIG welding and stick welding, really, for that matter. But I've never really mastered vertical welding, so I wanted to see what the difference is. This one I went up, and you can see it does not look the best. It's odd shaped. It has sort of a hump in the middle. And this one I went down, and it looks so much better. So this is what I mean with setting this down 2 inches, so I can put 1 or 2 of these depending on sort of how short of material I think I'll store on here. Probably just be one in the center, you know, make it the same 18 inches long. So I did have to grind down the welds so that this would sit flat and not sit on a bump on a weld, but where I didn't need to grind, like in the center here, I did not. Well, like I said, the garage floor may not be the flattest because it pitches towards the center, but it seems to be sitting fine. It looks good. As far as I can tell, it's square. So I'll finish welding up all these. For these center pieces that'll go here, I cut one with the same angle, 20 degrees, the bottom, 20 degrees at the top, but obviously I need to cut a little chunk out of here. The question is how much. So, I think this is right. Well, we'll see. Looks to be about 1 inch. So I need to slide this that way 1 inch. So I'm thinking if I take that same inch, go like that, just sort of eyeball what vertical is. So I can't cut that on this chop saw. So what I'll use instead is this relatively new metal metal portable saw, I guess it's called. See how that works. So it doesn't cut all the way through, which is fine. To the other side. The way I drew the line, I want to keep the line on this piece and basically cut the edge of the line. Well, it seems to fit. This angle worked out really well. Might be just a touch long, maybe by 1/8 of an inch. So when I do the other side, cut the one for the other side, I'll cut this just a bit shorter. These two are all cut. I welded them fully in place. It wasn't as perfect as it might appear. I did have a little grinding to do on one of these where the angle wasn't quite right. I had a little bit of a gap there. I had to grind a little bit. A couple corners were just a little bit proud. So I ground them down and I cut this piece at the center of it. So the centers line up there. So that is ready to be welded home. So yeah, as I discussed having, maybe some other ones here, and I may in the future, but for now, I really just want to cover this up so we don't have a lot of moisture going in there. It does have an opening right there where the moisture can come out if need be. But hopefully with this welded like that, there won't be much, if any. So I want to flip this upside down here at some point, but before I do, I want to put 2 more pieces on. And the way the structure is right now, there's nothing, if for some reason there was a lot of heavy weight in the center, there's not much preventing this center from sagging. So what I'm going to do is put 2 angle pieces. One will go from here down to there, and basically the opposite side. So in order for this to go down, then this piece here would have to either stretch or bring this piece with it, but this would have to sort of shrink. So whenever you can make a triangle, that's sort of the best structurally for stiffness. So I don't know the angle. I could measure it and figure it out, but for the purposes of this, since it's really not that critical, I can come up here, I can come down there. Whatever I put is going to be a lot stiffer than what it is now. So I'm just going to eyeball where I think about the bottom of the 2x2 will be, and eyeball this to where the bottom of it. Just so it's going to be the same angle, instead of going from up here down to here, which would be sort of a compound angle. I'm going to go from here to here, which will be the same plane, so it's going to be the same angle, basically just like the feet, sort of in opposite directions. So for the length, really, I just measured 55.5, just sort of guessed, and boy, it came out really good. There's certainly some wiggle room if I don't get it quite right. Like here, you can see the angle may not be exactly right, with the welding. Just don't look at that one. That was not my best example of work. But this sets there nicely, sort of right on top of that weld. And I did fit the other one here, which fits similarly. There it is. So the center will not be allowed to sag now. That's it. That's all I'm doing for cross bracing. I think that's more than enough. Obviously, I don't want any more weight to this as necessary. And no more welding, no more materials needed than necessary. the reason I cut those off, those are about 4 feet. The flats, or the bars, whatever the proper terminology is, they came in 20-foot lengths. But I also have a repair to do in my dump truck body, which is 16 feet. So I'm reserving the two 16-foot pieces for that. Cut the 4-foot pieces off. They'll be welded to the ends of those, and they'll be the feet. So with a little bit of wetness on the ground, those metal chips stay there. They get stuck instead of getting sucked up by the magnet. It's amazing. There's still a lot here that I'll let things dry out and I'll go over it again. It's amazing how far those little chips go. I mean, that's 6-8 feet away from where I was working. So I think I've cut everything I need now for metal, so I'll take this back outside. You'll notice those are all different lengths. I'll explain that when all is put together. 18 of those, 3 piles of 6, the 4 feet, and the angle iron, which I'll explain here when I put that on. So these angle irons are here basically as a spot for the tractor forks or skid steer forks, should I ever get one, to go underneath and not allow this to sort of slide side to side on the floor, on the forks, because metal to metal can be very slippery, particularly if it's conditions like it is now, with some snow on stuff. So I've centered these so they're 4.5 feet. My forks are about 4 feet. You know, I guess just a 1/2 inch for a little bit of slop. So the forks, because this is upside down, but the forks will slide in here, and then, you know, this shouldn't be able to shift side to side. So when it's fully loaded with scrap material, then I think that's a good thing. So I'm going to weld these as we are, and then flip it back over. And there's one other thing before I flip it back over, but after I weld these, I'll explain what that is. So these pieces of angle iron here welded home. What I want to do before I flip it over, but I think I'll leave it here because when I weld those things together, this is sort of a nice table height. I want to grind a notch in here somewhere, probably on the inside, so that if there is any water that gets in here, it can drain out. And I don't want to leave, like I have here, just sort of a gap where I don't weld, because this will be in the dirt, the mud, and if I leave too small of a gap, it may easily get clogged up. So I'm going to take my grinder and just grind a notch in all 4 of these legs in here. So when I weld the feet, which of those are larger pads there, there'll be a place for water to escape. So you can see these pieces are not all exactly the same. Either the cut wasn't exactly perpendicular. I know when I had the saw on the floor, I propped it up best I could, but it might not have been setting flat on the surface of the chop saw. Or at least in one case, because I corrected it, if I welded one side, it might have tilted a bit as the weld solidified and caused a gap on this side when I welded it and didn't realize it. So. But I'm guessing the ones that are off left and right here are because the cut was not square. For the most part, the only issue I think I would have had would have been left and right this way. Like these 2 here are slightly different, for instance. But we're all ready to flip it back over and weld on the feet, which will go on here, and then put on the actual brackets to hold the steel. So you can notice over here there's just a little bit of tilt in this. I'm guessing it's just because the floor is different over there than it is over here. So this leg here has a bit of a gap. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to worry about this. I don't even know if this is setting on the same plane, if it moved after I welded it, if it's the floor and not exactly a flat plane. But to make sure that it's setting well against the feet, I'm going to just put a bit of weight over here, and then I'll put the weight on the opposite corner when I weld this one to make sure it's sitting flat. All right, so I'll weld all these together and then we'll come back. That's what the finished product will look like all the way around. So this is sort of where I decided to go a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, just so I tried to minimize the footprint and still have some decent capacity. So the more capacity here, granted it's higher up, so higher center of gravity, but it's towards the center. Plus I didn't want something sticking out farther than necessary out here, so it's just sort of arbitrary. So I think these are about 1 inch difference, each of them. And then at the top here for whatever I choose to put. So I think my plan of attack is I'm going to put the 4 corners on, except for this one doesn't matter. But the 4 corners, and then for the middle 3, I'll bring in a piece of something, tubing or angle iron that I can use to go between them, and then just set the middle ones on rather than trying to measure from the floor, which I'm not sure how flat it is. The other thing that I had thought of as a potential concern, I don't think it's going to be an issue, is if this is loaded pretty heavy and I'm picking it up with the forks here and here, granted the center is supported and obviously the ends are, but is there a chance that this 2x2 could bend up here? as long as I have it relatively equally weighted, then the weight's going to be distributed equally on these 4 places. Between that and this is only a 2 foot, you know, from a sort of a rigid support to where the force will be, only about a 2 foot difference. So I'm thinking it'll be fine. If I see any indication that it's going to bend, then I probably would put some angles down to here, which is actually what I had on my original plan. So you can see here, my original plan was to have it come down here and sort of brace where I'd pick it up, but in the end I decided that I would rather have some support here in the center, so I just went that way instead of over here. But for the most part, I've basically followed my vision. So what I'm going to do is I'll finish welding these up. I'll bring you back when I put the center ones in, and then the only other real thing I need to do before it's ready for use is just grind all the edges. You know, the corners. I don't want really unnecessarily sharp corners here sticking out where I can just brush by and cut myself or something like that. I'm not going to paint it. You know, my experience with this sort of stuff out, and it's going to develop surface rust, but that rust, that corrosion, that surface corrosion in and of itself provides some barrier, because the corrosion sort of slows down when the you know, the base metal, it doesn't have the access to the oxygen in the air with that corrosion layer. So it'll look rusted, but it's not gonna, I mean, it would be decades long after I've perished where there'd be any structural impact to any corrosion, in my opinion. And I'm not into necessarily it looking good, other than, you know, I want it to look decent. I'm not gonna make a shabby job, but I'm not going to paint it to make it look good. That's just a lot of work for, in my mind, a little bit of satisfaction. Well, I'm going to have to grind a little bit of this weld down so this will fit on there squarely. But this is a good example of what I was talking about just a bit ago. This is a 2x4 rectangular tubing. I think it's 1/8-inch wall. But I bought that. That's leftover from when I built my my 1-ton dually dump body, which was, that's got to be at least 20 years ago. So this has been sitting outside for 20 years. It has some surface rust, but inside it's very light, and it's just as good as new, with just that little bit of sort of cosmetic rust on it. So that's what I mean by you know, steel like that out in the open is not going to be a big deal, at least with a thicker wall. I mean, if it was sheet metal, it's a different story. It is finished. The last thing I did is ground down all the exposed sharp corners and edges. So we should be set to go. One thing I don't think I mentioned, but when I welded, or when I cut these pieces, I made this 1/4 of an inch wider than 2 inches. So these are cut 2 1/4 so that I had an 1/8 inch on each side. So I could have sort of a fillet weld instead of having this flush, which would have been more of a butt weld, sort of more like this. It would have been okay either way, I think, but it's a little bit easier to weld the fillet and make sure I have a decent, strong weld. It does slide quite a bit easier with those feet on. So that is a diesel truck. Normally I plug it in a block heater to warm it up and it starts right up, but I mean it's 33 degrees. It's really not that cold. But rather than completely drain the batteries, I guess I'll plug it in, or I may not, but I'll probably have to charge the batteries now. So what I wanted, there's two things I wanted to do, which now I don't know how I'm going to do it. One is all these metal fence posts. I have a couple pieces of PVC pipe as well that I want to put on this rack, but I don't know how to get around. I guess I could just come here and lift it over the truck. Boy, that sounds like a good idea. We'll see if it works. I don't know what the resting place is going to be for this. Whatever I do for the rest of this winter is just going to be temporary. Somewhere out back where we won't run into it with snowmobiles or anything like that. But I don't know exactly where it's going to be. Well, I am very glad to have this project done. The only problem I see is snow will fall off the roof. That's fine. I mean, this is a better lot than these guys would have been subjected to, just laying on the ground or on some 2x4 somewhere. So yeah, this has been on my list of things to do for a couple years, so very glad to have that done. Sort of out here in no man's land. But it's right next to my my woodshed and boiler, which I have easy access to there. So it wouldn't be that difficult to come out here and grab a piece of steel if I had a project or some need. So that'll complete this. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. So thanks for tagging along, and I hope you stay tuned for future videos. Thank you.